Testing. All right. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone to today's Transit Commission meeting. We're beginning today's meeting a bit differently than usual. Starting this month, I'm pleased to announce that we will begin each meeting by recognizing an OC Transpo employee as part of the TransSecure program for their dedication in going above and beyond the call of duty for members of our community. You will recall that TransSecure is a well-established community watch program on wheels. With that in mind, it should come as no surprise that being the eyes and ears of the community is all part of a day's work for OC Transpo employees. This past January, a bus operator named Greg Marcus was instrumental in locating a young person who was in distress. The missing youth had left a suicide note before leaving home one morning. Our partners at the Ottawa Police Service shared the description of the individual with OC Transpo, and we shared their concern in trying to find this young person unharmed, obviously as quickly as possible. With a keen eye for detail, Greg noticed a teen on his bus that matched the young person's description. Greg immediately alerted OC Transpo's Transit Operations Control Center. The young person got off the bus before transit staff could arrive. Thankfully, a special constable found the young person on the highway a short time later and stayed with the youth until the Ottawa Police Service arrived and safely returned the individual to their home. I'm so pleased that Greg is here with us today. I would like to invite Greg to join me here at the podium. As chair of the Transit Commission, I want to congratulate and thank Greg for your outstanding efforts to help someone in need and for carrying out your duty of providing safe, secure, and reliable transit services to the people of Ottawa. It is my pleasure to present you with a certificate for the January 2014 TransSecure Call of the Month. So, declarations of interest. Seeing none, confirmation of minutes 45 from February 19th, 2014. Carried. Communications as listed on the agenda. Presentations. There is a short chair's update. And Mr. Manconi, do you have an update? Yes, there is an update from Mr. Manconi as well. And then item number 3, there's a presentation, so we'll hold that item and return to it. I'd now like to take this opportunity to update the Transit Commission on a number of items. As I mentioned at last month's meeting, representatives from the American Public Transit Association are in Ottawa this week to conduct an independent peer review of OC Transpo's safety and security programs. I am pleased to report that the APTA delegation has arrived and the peer review is now in progress. The delegation is also in attendance this morning, and I would like to invite them to stand. It's my pleasure to introduce, maybe if you can just wave when I introduce you, David Genova, Assistant General Manager, Safety, Security, and Facilities from Denver, Colorado. Matthew DeRosier, Department Manager, Health, Safety, and Environmental Compliance from Orange County, California. Stephen Hansen, Manager, Safety and Security from Calgary, Alberta, and from APTA. Mike Smith and David Hahn, Senior Specialist, Safety and Security with APTA, I believe. Right. Okay. I think that. As members of the Transit Commission, you understand very well the integral role safety plays in our ability to provide secure and reliable transit service. The importance of a continued focus on safety and support of secure and reliable transit cannot be overstated, which is why we are following through on our commitment outlined in the 10-point safety plan to work with the American Public Transit Association on this review. I'd like to thank the APTA peer review team for joining us here this morning. As their schedule is very busy over the next few days, the team will not be staying for the entirety of today's Transit Commission, but I thank you for being here, and as I told you in the hall this morning, you're certainly welcome to stay as long as you can. So thank you. The next item, building on this theme of safety, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight the important role that transit special constables play in keeping our communities safe. We know that the Transit Services Department has a long-standing tradition of working in close partnership with the Ottawa Police Service to provide a safe environment for our riders who use our services and for our staff who provide nearly 100 million passenger trips annually. During the evenings of this past February 26th to March 1st, OC Transpo Special Constables joined with the Ottawa Police Service to conduct a zero-tolerance safety blitz that focused on activities at key transit hubs in the West End, including Westboro, Lincoln Field Station, Pinecrest Station, Baseline Station, Strandherd, and Marketplace stations in Barrhaven. The zero-tolerance safety blitz builds on our mutual commitment to ensure safety and security on transit by increasing visibility of officers on the transitway. During this operation, officers both in full uniform and in plain clothes addressed 98 various municipal, provincial, and criminal offenses occurring on OC Transpo vehicles and connecting properties. These joint projects are undertaken throughout the year, and it is our plan to continue these efforts in the future. Next, I'm excited to announce the installation of the next vehicle arrival display system at Greenboro Station. The current slate of video displays located at stations throughout the transitway which show bus arrival times are ending their life cycle and will be replaced by new display technology. In addition to displaying bus schedule information, the screens will feature customer service alerts to help keep our customers informed. The screens will also display the time, weather, news information, and advertising content. The first two new display screens at Greenboro will be installed on March 21st by Pattison Outdoor Advertising in accordance with their 10-year advertising contract with OC Transpo. The installations at Greenboro will herald the rollout of up to 57 new displays at 32 locations, including all busy transitway platforms and O-Train platforms throughout 2014 and 2015. The new displays improve upon the current video screens with increased font size and better image quality and conform to the standards outlined under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. These displays are a positive development and will help OC Transpo customers in making their transportation decisions by providing the current status of the transitway systems and arrival time of the next bus for OC Transpo, for the O-Train. Crime Stoppers DECO program. Lastly, I'm pleased to update the Commission about the introduction of a citywide program aimed at curbing vandalism to city bus shelters. You'll recall at our Transit Commission meeting last April that OC Transpo, in partnership with Crime Stoppers, Ottawa Police Service, and my council colleague, Canada South Councillor Alan Hubley, launched a pilot initiative whereby Crime Stoppers decos were placed on the bus shelters in the Canada South Ward. The goal of the pilot project was to provide a visual resource for our customers to use if they spot vandalism or potential damage to shelters and help in preventing this damage. The project enabled us to compare previously logged damage reports to those reports logged after the decals were in place. Throughout the pilot project, there was a decrease in the number of recorded incidents of vandalism, with 8 incidents recorded before the pilot began from January 1st to April 28, 2013, and only 1 incident recorded following the introduction of the pilot between April 29th and December 31st. We're encouraged by these results and look forward to continuing working with our partners at Crime Stoppers and Ottawa Police Service regarding the citywide rollout of the Crime Stoppers decal program on city bus shelters later this spring. That concludes my verbal update. Are there any questions? Seeing none received? Okay, and I'll now turn the presentation over to Mr. Manconi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have one brief but important update, and that is I'm happy to share with the Transit Commission that last evening ATU 279 para-operators voted 79% in favor of the tentative collective agreement. Mr. O'Connor and his team will be bringing that forward to you shortly in terms of the details for consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my update.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi. Any questions for Mr. Manconi? Seeing none, received on the General Manager's update. Received. Okay, item number 3, and that's the Transit Services 2013 Customer Survey. And Mr. Manconi, I am going to let you kick that off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to make a few opening comments, then I'm going to turn it over to Pat Scrimgeour, who's going to walk you through the presentation, and then I'm going to do some closing remarks. Madam Chair, members of Commission, when I took over the role of General Manager of OC Transpo 2 years ago, I identified 2 key focus areas for the organization: customer service and employee engagement. When we speak to our employees, they tell us that they are committed to serving customers and being the face of the organization. They tell us customer satisfaction is the #1 issue for the overall success of OC Transpo. They describe their roles as a commitment to servicing the customer, and they are focused on being professional and caring. Together with the great women and men of OC Transpo, I'm happy to announce that we have achieved the highest customer satisfaction results that we have ever achieved since the Transit Services Department started carrying out a yearly survey of its customers back in 2008. The 2013 customer survey, which Pat will take you through, shows a significant increase in the overall satisfaction of transit users and the wider community. Overall satisfaction has increased significantly, up from 73% last year to 80% in 2013. OC Transpo's responsiveness to customer needs has also increased from 79% to 82%. And respondents to the survey tell us that our employees are very caring towards our customers, and we're trending certainly in the right direction, going from 57% to 68%, making this the highest rating for employees caring for our customers. And respondents are also confident that our operators know what to do if an incident occurs, coming in at 83% in 2013, and they're able to get help quickly at a rating of 78% in 2013, and that's up from 62% of last year. This year, we enhanced the survey and included additional questions on safety and security. Respondents gave OC Transpo safety and security measures a positive rating of 89%. OC Transpo continues to prioritize safety and security and will continue to operationalize the 10-point safety plan and work closely with our partners on providing an environment that is safe for our customers and our employees. Madam Chair, we are very encouraged by the survey's results, and we're looking forward in continuing our work. We know that our work on service excellence and customer satisfaction is a continuous journey, and our work on this will never end. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Chair and the Transit Commission for their guidance and direction in these last 2 years, our union leaders for working side by side with management and staff, and to the OC Transpo staff for their commitment, dedication, and unrelenting effort in providing the best transit service to our customers. Together, we will continue our work in strengthening Ottawa's position as a very strong and respected transit leader. We will use the survey results to provide additional improvements to our service and further improve customer satisfaction. I will now ask Pat Scrimgeour to take you through the survey results.
Thanks, John. Guess this doesn't work. So OC Transpo, as John mentioned, OC Transpo has carried out a survey of its customers every year since 2008, and we did so periodically, not every year before that. The survey is an opportunity to hear the thoughts of our customers in a structured way by repeating the same questions asked in the same way each year with some adaptations or new questions added as new matters of concern are identified. And we can compare customers' thoughts and impressions from one year to the next. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the survey method, and then comment on the results on the overall impression of OC Transpo, then what our customers say about the things that are important to them, setting aside safety and security at that point, and then specifically what our customers say about their safety and security, and then John will give you some overall conclusions. It was a telephone survey, random telephone survey conducted between November 22nd and December 10th at the end of last year. In all, there were 1,525 interviews. 820 of those approximately were transit customers, people who'd used transit in the last 6 months. Because it's random, you don't know if we're getting a transit customer or another person until we call. The results have been calibrated to align with the distribution of the population in the different parts of Ottawa, also calibrated to ensure that we have a good mix of age groups, that there's a good mix of women and men, and that where there's gaps in the surveys towards the end of that survey period, more calls are made to boost up those requirements to make it a good sample. The margin of error is plus or minus 2.5% for the overall results, and larger than that when we look at the smaller group of transit customers only. So the main findings, confidence in OC Transpo is at its highest levels in years among both customers and in the wider community. The confidence in employees caring for customers and that operators know what to do in an emergency are both at their highest level ever. Women have greater concerns about safety and security than men do in particular ways, and the opportunity for safety and security improvements is greatest late at night. So first of all, the overall impressions. We asked this question: taking all factors into consideration, what overall rating would you give to Ottawa's public transit service, OC Transpo? Very good, good, neither good nor poor, poor, or very poor. And then we report to you on the percentage of respondents who reply good or very good. And this is the same way we've been doing this since 2008. So transit customers this year replied good or very good 80% of the time. Others, non-transit customers, 73% of the time. And then when we look back over the years, we can see that 80% is far higher than it was last year, which itself was far higher than the year before, and 80% is almost as high as we had in 2008, the survey that was taken shortly before the transit strike. Also, the overall rating among people who don't use OC Transpo is at 73%, the highest we've ever seen. So there's those 2 points summarized: the highest overall rating since before the strike and the second highest rating that we've seen at all. Then we asked this question: in terms of being responsive to customer needs, would you say that OC Transpo is succeeding, making an effort, not making an effort, or failing? And we report on how many said succeeding or making an effort. That's at 82%. And that is the highest we have ever seen. Far, far higher than a couple of years ago, and a little bit of an improvement on last year. And when we break that down between transit customers and other people, we can see we're at the highest rating ever on from both of those groups. Then we ask the question: organizations are sometimes rated on the basis of how much their employees show they care about their customers. On that basis, how caring would you say OC Transpo employees are about their customers? Very caring, caring, neither caring nor uncaring, uncaring, or very uncaring. And then we report on the number who say caring or very caring, and that's at 68%. And that's the highest we've ever seen. Quite a big jump over last year, and far higher than it was in 2009. Now, it's just important to note here, this question has only been asked since 2009 and was not asked in the 2008 survey, the one that came just before the transit strike. And then when we break that down between transit customers and other people, you can see that we're at the highest rating ever seen on both of those groups. Then we ask this question: which of the following overall characteristics do you think best represents OC Transpo? Low cost and affordable, safe and secure, environmental sustainability, convenient and reliable, or superior service quality? The largest response to that was convenient and reliable. The second was safe and secure. And then a gap under that. And then the next two were environmental sustainability and low cost and affordable. And only a very small number of people identified superior service quality as the main characteristic that they saw. But when you compare that over the years, you see that it's very similar, that the breakdown is generally the same over all the years we've been asking this question, the last 3 years. So overall conclusions about the overall impressions: at an 80% good or very good rating from customers, 73% from others. 2013 has the highest overall rating since before the transit strike. It's the highest rating we've seen for OC Transpo responsiveness to customer needs. It's the highest rating we've ever seen for employees caring for customers, and the characteristics that people say they hold of OC Transpo rated consistently with the previous years. So now I'll talk about what our customers say about what is important to them, setting aside for the moment the safety and security aspects. We put 15 attributes of transit service in front of people and asked them on a scale of 1 to 10 to say whether they're important and to say whether they agree with the statement. The top 5 of the 15 that we read to people, all very, very high, rated almost 10 out of 10. Bus service is reliable and runs on time. Bus routes are well planned. Bus drivers are respectful towards passengers. For the cost, OC Transpo delivers good service value, and passengers are respectful towards bus drivers. This is not how people rated us. This is how important those considerations are. The next slide shows how we were rated on those things. People said that bus service is reliable and runs on time at 6.7 out of 10. People said bus routes are well planned at 7.3 out of 10. People said that bus drivers are respectful towards passengers at 8.9 out of 10. People said that for the cost, OC Transpo delivers good service value at 7.1 out of 10. And people said that passengers are respectful towards bus drivers at 8.2 out of 10. When we take those 5 and look back over all the years, some of those questions have been asked since 2008, some since 2011. In every case, the rating is higher than it was last year, and in almost every case, the rating is the highest we've ever seen. These are the 15 that we asked people about. There might very well be other things that people would characterize as being more important, but in the structure of the survey, these were the 15 we asked about. And the first important point on this overall is that on the 10 measures that we asked about this year that we had also asked about in previous years, we got a higher rating return from customers this year than we did last year. In particular, though, we asked a new question, which was, Presto makes transit more convenient. And when the answer came back at 6.5 out of 10, we wanted to talk a little bit more about how that breaks down. So the next slide shows how the opinions have been different between people who are familiar with the use of Presto and the people who've not yet used it. The first two lines of that table are people who now use Presto, people who pay their fare using a monthly pass on Presto or who pay using e-purse on Presto. The final 3 groups are people who are using cash ticket or another type of pass, like a paper pass or a U-pass. And you can see that among people who use Presto, it's rated as very important. It's rated at between 8 and 9 out of 10, and that they agree that it's made the use of OC Transpo more convenient, between 7 and 8 out of 10. The people who've not yet used Presto still agree that it's important, but not as important, still agree that it's a positive change, but not as positive. So even the non-users of Presto have positive impressions of Presto, but the people who've started to use it have stronger positive impressions. So on these top 5 and all the aspects that are ranked by customers as the top 5 are very consistent with the departmental priorities that the Commission has set and are consistent with the areas where OC Transpo is focusing its work and its attention. The ratings of all 10 aspects that have been surveyed previously are equal to or higher than the ratings seen in all previous years. And from a survey method point of view, the fact that we've seen higher ratings on every individual aspect bolster our confidence that the survey result showing the higher overall rating is a reliable survey result. So now to speak about what our customers say about their safety and security. The customer survey was expanded this year to look further than we had before into customers' impressions, feelings, and experiences with safety and security. We added some new questions that were modeled on a survey that's been conducted successfully for the last 5 years by Calgary Transit. Those will serve as a baseline for comparisons with results in future years, but you can understand that the survey questions that we've just started asking this year, we can't compare previous years yet. But we also continued to ask the questions that we had asked in previous years' surveys so we could get some continuity and see whether there'd been change over the years. So the first was the overall impression. We asked, please tell me if you agree or disagree with the following statements, where on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 means you strongly agree and 1 means you strongly disagree. And one of those questions we asked was, overall you feel OC Transpo is a safe and secure transit system. And then we report on the percentage of respondents who give a rating of 6 or higher. So that matches what we'd done in those previous answers of reporting on good or very good, caring or very caring. 89% of people gave a score of 6 or higher out of 10. And that is very consistent with what we'd seen in preceding years. We only asked this question in this way for the last 3 years, and you can see we're at 90% the last 2 years, 89% this year. From the statistical perspective, exactly the same. Here's the new question that we asked. It's almost the same, but we wanted to ask a different way and see if we can, over time, see whether customers hold that same opinion when the question is asked in a slightly different way. Thinking about the overall safety and security of Ottawa's transit system, how would you rate OC Transpo on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is very safe and secure and 1 is very unsafe and insecure? And we report the average rating here. So we've got an average this year of 7.4 out of 10. We don't have any conclusions to draw. We will repeat that question in future years and see how that number changes and also how that number relates to the question when it's asked the first way. Now we've got 2 questions which are about confidence that customers have. Please tell me if you agree or disagree on a scale of 1 to 10. First of all, when using OC Transpo, if an incident occurs, you are confident the driver knows what to do. And the second, when using OC Transpo, if an incident occurs, you are confident you can get help quickly. And then, as before, we report on the percentage of respondents who give a rating of 6 or higher. So in the first one, the confidence that the driver knows what to do is at 83%. And on the second one, confidence that you, the customer, can get help quickly is at 78%. And those are both by far the highest we've ever seen on those 2 questions. Your confidence, the customer's confidence that drivers know what to do at 83%, much higher than it was the year before at 71%. And you can see that it was very consistent at about 71%, trending slightly upwards in the last couple of years, and then a big jump this year to 83%. And confidence that you can get help quickly was, for several years, floating around 60%, had a higher spike in 2011, and then much higher this year at 78%. Now, we then went on to ask customers about when they feel safe and secure, how they feel safe and secure at different times of the day and at different points in the system. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, the following experiences, which we'll show you on the next page, rated from 1 to 10. So, waiting for a bus at a bus stop during the day and riding on the bus during the day, when we break it down between women and men, women say they're at 96% safe and secure on that score of 6 or more out of 10 when waiting for the bus, and 97% when riding on the bus. And we bring in men beside that at 96% when waiting for the bus, 98% when riding on the bus. You can see that those numbers are quite consistent between waiting for the bus and riding on the bus, between women and men during the daytime. Then we asked the same about the early evening, and the scores are a little bit lower. 89% feel safe and secure waiting for a bus. 90% of women feel safe and secure riding on the bus. And then we bring in men. Men also a little lower than in the daytime, but a little higher than women. Men report feeling safe and secure 94% waiting for a bus and 95% riding on the bus in the early evening. And then we ask the same question about late at night. And you can see that the scores are much lower among women at 49% and 57%. And you can see that they're also much lower among men, but not as much lower as they are among women. So we can draw the conclusion from these figures here that the concern for safety and security, or the feeling of safety and security, is lower. The feeling of safety and security is lower among women than men in the evening, and lower late at night among everyone than it is either during the early evening or the daytime, and that the gap between women and men the gap in opinion is not there during the daytime. There's a little gap in the early evening, and there's quite a large gap late at night. So there's the conclusions we draw, that the concern about safety and security is greater among women than among men at certain times of the day. The concern about safety and security is greater late at night than it is during the day or the early evening. The concern about safety and security is greater when waiting for a bus than when riding on the bus, and that the difference between women's views and men's views is greater late at night than it is at other times of the day. Then we went on to ask the same question on a scale of 1 to 10, does not or does make you feel safe and secure, rating the following experiences. And these are about OC Transpo staff and equipment on the buses and at the stations. So first of all, and these are ranked in order of the highest rating to the lower ratings. All had a positive rating. The ability to make special nighttime bus requests, women rated that, said at 86% that they feel safer and secure because of that. The presence of OC Transpo employees at 84%, the presence of uniformed law enforcement personnel at 84%, emergency call boxes at the stations at 79%, lighting at transitway stations at 77%, video surveillance equipment at stations at 75%, public telephones and help phones at 74%, and the presence of security mirrors at 67%. And then when we compare that to men, very similar ratings, 89% for the ability to make special nighttime bus stop requests, 85% for the presence of employees, 83% for the presence of uniformed law enforcement personnel, 88% for emergency call boxes, 90% for lighting at stations, 84% for video surveillance at stations, 79% for public phones, and 73% for security mirrors. So the interesting thing here is that the ratings, they come in approximately the same order, but that things that are done by people, by having the special nighttime requests, having employees there, having law enforcement personnel there, they're rated very similarly between women and men. The things that are more built environment and static, like equipment at the station, are both rated positively, but lead to higher levels of feeling safe and secure among men than they do among women. So it's the active human part of the experience reassures women more than the physical built things do. So the conclusions on this group of questions are that women's feelings of safety and security around these aspects are lower than men's are. The Safe Stop and the Night Stop programs are both highly rated by both women and men. The presence of OC Transpo employees and uniformed law enforcement personnel are highly valued by both women and men. The lighting and other safety and security equipment is highly valued, but more valued by men than it is by women. And then we asked about some safety and security experiences, and we asked a number of questions under this category. While using OC Transpo, how often have you personally experienced any of the following circumstances? Please provide your answer in the forms of often, occasionally, rarely, or never. So first of all, things that have happened to people while they're on the system. We grouped them separately here between women and men. People who have experienced sexual harassment towards you yourself. No women said often, 2% said occasionally, 98% said rarely or never. Physical assault, fighting with you. Nobody said often, 1% said occasionally, 99% said rarely or never. Verbal threats or abuse towards you. Nobody said often, 1% said occasionally, 99% rarely or never. Same questions among men. Sexual harassment towards you. 1% said often, nobody said occasionally, 99% said rarely or never. Physical assault, fighting with you. Nobody said often, 1% said occasionally, 99% said rarely or never. Verbal threats or abuse towards you, 1% said often, 2% said occasionally, 97% said rarely or never. Then we move on to questions of what you've seen going on around you. This is responses from women. Have you seen people carrying weapons? 0 said often, 2% said occasionally, 98% said rarely or never. Have you seen drug use or drug dealing? 1% said often, 6% of women said occasionally, 93% said rarely or never. Have you seen people drinking alcohol? 3% said often, 11% said occasionally, 86% said rarely or never. Have you seen people who are intoxicated or drunk? 12% of women said often, 33% said occasionally, 55% said rarely or never. 55%. Have you seen people who are arguing or yelling? 12% of women said often, 38% said occasionally, 50% said rarely or never. Have you seen people swearing? 44% of women said often, 32% said occasionally, 24% said rarely or never. Then the same question when asked of men. Have you seen people carrying weapons? 2% said often, 2% said occasionally, 96% said rarely or never. Have you seen drug use or drug dealing? 2% said often, 5% said occasionally, 92% said rarely or never. Have you seen people drinking alcohol? 4% of men said often, 11% said occasionally, 85% said rarely or never. Have you seen people who are intoxicated or drunk? 11% of men said often, 29% said occasionally, 60% said rarely or never. Have you seen people who are arguing or yelling? 9% of men said often, 33% said occasionally, 58% said rarely or never. And have you seen people swearing? 30% of men said often, 37% said occasionally, and 33% said rarely or never. Now the next group is the same questions as we asked at first, but what have you observed towards other people? Have you observed sexual harassment towards someone else? 1% of women said often, 7% of women said occasionally, 92% of women said rarely or never. Physical assault. Have you seen fighting between other people? 1% of women said often, 6% said occasionally, 93% said rarely or never. Have you observed verbal threats or abuse towards other people? 3% of women said often, 17% said occasionally, 80% said rarely or never. And then the same question asked of men. Have you observed sexual harassment towards someone else? 2% of men said often, 5% said occasionally, 93% said rarely or never. Have you seen physical assault, fighting between other people? 1% of men said often, 3% said occasionally, 96% said rarely or never. Have you seen verbal threats or abuse towards other people? 4% of men said often, 13% said occasionally, 83% said rarely or never. Now I'll just reiterate, all of these questions were asked this year for the first time. We will ask them in future years as well, and that will allow us to measure whether people's observation is changing and maybe how the effects of some of the safety programs that we've been talking about here are changing how people experience OC Transpo. So our conclusions from these numbers: women say they experience sexual harassment more than men say they do. Men say they experience verbal threats and abuse more than women say they do. Women say they observe those different types of aggression against others more than men say they do. And both men and women say they've observed intoxication, arguing, and swearing in more substantial numbers. So, some overall conclusions on the safety and security questions that we asked. Customers continue to rate OC Transpo safety and security highly. Customers' confidence that operators know what to do and that they can get help if there's an incident have increased significantly. Customers' observations suggest that we should invest time and resources into safety and security matters, and also that the opportunities for improvement may be greatest while waiting for a bus and riding a bus late at night. So now I'll turn this back over to John for some overall conclusions and remarks.
Thank you, Pat. Madam Chair, the overall conclusions, I want to touch on those, and then we're going to talk about, so what are we going to do with the survey results, because this survey is conducted to ensure that the department is aligned to its quest for continuous customer service improvements. So in terms of the overall conclusion, you've heard that OC Transpo has received very high ratings in almost all areas. Confidence in OC Transpo is at its highest levels in years amongst both customers and the wider community, and that's important because that speaks to our brand, and we want our brand to be respected by the community as a whole. Confidence in our employees caring for customers and that operators know what to do in emergency situations has been rated high, and that's very important also. Both women and men rate safety and security highly. And there's opportunities for safety and security improvements, and they're the greatest late at night. And the survey certainly indicate that we're on the right direction in terms of both Council and Transit Commission priorities. So what will we do with these results? And we've already started to take action. We're not waiting. We're moving forward. We are most definitely going to continue with the employee engagement strategy that we deployed 2 years ago. Because that fuels our employees in terms of being part of the organization and being connected with the customer in every aspect. We're going to continue to develop safety and security measures to reduce barriers to customers, use of transit, especially among women and at nighttime. So we understand that rating in the survey, and we're now going to focus in on that. We're going to develop strategies for proactive safety and security patrolling and monitoring for areas. And what we're going to do there is we're going to use this survey data and the crime data analysis, which Mr. Jim Babe is in the final stages of completing with the support of OPS. So that will be available shortly. And we're going to continue to identify ways to improve transit service quality across all elements of the service. And we're certainly going to continue with the Presto Customer Care Program to help everyone take advantage of all aspects of that system. So in terms of safety and security, our staff are the eyes and ears of the community when they're out there, both driving, supervising, and maintaining our facilities. You know about our walk and ride program, and that's been very successful, and that's highly visible. We're going to continue with that, along with our special constables and vehicles, and they're also augmenting our walk and ride program where they're out doing foot patrols at stations. Our fare inspectors are part of our Be Visible program, which you've heard in the survey results. That's one of the highest rating things that makes someone feel safe on our system is the visibility of any OC Transpo staff. Transit supervisors and transit law officials, I'm happy to announce that at the end of the March they're working together. They're going to do an integrated walk along at stations, and so they're going to pair up and do some enhanced visibility on all fronts. This last one on this bullet, this is some of those simple things that, when you see data such as what's come out of this survey, it starts to indicate or to show signs of things that you can do. So a simple thing, we have facilities maintenance staff at all our facilities throughout the day and late at night. And what we recognize is they're not highly visible, so we're giving them highly visible OC Transpo uniforms so that customers can connect up with them if they need assistance or support of any kind. We're also going to be looking at lighting levels at all our transitway stations, and if they need to be improved, we're going to improve them. We're going to be looking at lighting levels inside some of our shelters and be innovative. If there's a way to bring power to them and it's feasible and affordable, we'll improve lighting at some of our shelters. And I'm happy also to announce that the team is going to look at solar-powered products for some of our shelters that don't have lighting. We did that a few years ago. Technology's advanced, and perhaps there's some affordable improvements we can do in this area. We're also, again, being very innovative. This came from staff. Look at our roof materials on our shelters to see if we can change the design of those or the specifications to let more natural light in or spill light from street lighting go into our shelters. We're going to look at sight lines, vegetation, shadow lines near our bus shelters. And one of our staff on their own came up with a very innovative, affordable LED lighting fixture for some of our stops at our transitway locations. It's going to improve the visibility of the sign, but also provide some additional lighting. So it's a combination of simple things and more sophisticated things, but working together at OC Transpo, our focus is on all of the elements that you've seen in this survey for our quest for continuous improvement on all fronts. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the presentation. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi, and I want to take this opportunity to congratulate OC Transpo, you, Mr. Manconi, the senior management team, and especially the employees of OC Transpo, because obviously this is very much a group effort. These are the best numbers we've seen, and this tells me that the confidence in OC Transpo is rising, and that's a credit to all of the people who work at OC Transpo every day. So thank you very much. I think we can all be pleased. I'll tell you what I'm pleased about. I'm really pleased that we added so many questions around safety and security, because it really starts to help guide this Transit Commission in making future decisions. And I know that we'll want to take some more time with this survey and the results of this survey to really contemplate what these results mean and how they can guide future decisions and budget allocations as we move forward. Just a quick observation, it seems obviously late at night is an issue that is something that we're going to have to focus on and address. Just a cursory look at those numbers tell me that women feel more safe with the presence of other live bodies. Men seem to feel safer when there's more equipment, more lighting, call boxes, those things. But women like to have someone else around, and that's what those numbers seem to indicate from this survey. So I think going forward, we really have to think about how this information that we have mined from this survey can really help us in improving OC Transpo even more going forward. So I think this survey is very valuable to us as an organization, and again, I think a real credit to all of the people that work at OC Transpo that we're back to pre-strike confidence levels in this organization. So thank you very much. There are lots of questions. We'll start with Commissioner Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First thing I wanted to say, I found this very interesting hearing it, but it's really hard to deal with it at the meeting. I don't see anything in this which would have been a problem of getting out in advance. I don't see anybody from Cowie here who I'm sure will be interested in what is here. Can somebody explain to me why this was not provided in advance so that the public could, because this is very important to the public, could be here to ask questions on it?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, what we have is a PowerPoint presentation. It's not a report. And I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end of getting a PowerPoint presentation electronically. And without the story and the context and the speaking points, it would have just been a bunch of data on a slide deck. So staff are doing their best to bring information forward. Last year and in previous years, we did technical briefings. We received feedback last year that, that information didn't get out in advance in the past. And last year's comments was, please bring your presentation to the Commission. And that's what we did. So this year we're hearing we want to receive information in advance. We'll learn and grow and we'll improve. We're going to prepare a package with all of the questions and the information. We'll have that available at the latest on Monday for anybody that wants to receive a copy of that. They can ask us, and we'll give them that on top of the PowerPoint presentation. But typically, Madam Chair, we don't issue staff presentations in advance, and that's what this is.
That may be the case, but I think it's still important that the public, in looking at this, might want to make presentations to the Commission. So, Madam Chair, whether this should not be an item on the future agenda now that it's out in the public, so that if the public wants to come and talk to us about these issues, we can get their feedback and pass it on to staff in a public forum.
Well, I think that the staff of OC Transport are going to take these results away and come back with recommendations. So perhaps in the context of recommendations, it'll be a public agenda where the public could come and comment.
But that will only deal with the ones they come back on with recommendations. And I think there's a general sense of this one that I think some groups
we can place it on an agenda in such a way, the survey results implementation, so that they can talk about anything they want.
Yeah. I think it is an important one, and despite what you've said, this is a fairly comprehensive PowerPoint, and I think it's not too hard to understand it when the questions are there, the responses are there. And if people had questions, they could come to this meeting and ask them, just as we are going to. It's one of the things that, as sometimes people speak to us, we're trying to be open and to people, and you're doing a really better job on that than we had in the past, and I thank you for that. But I think we have a next step to go.
Yes, Madam Chair. I mean, just a comment on that, because the one thing I will say is we are a very open organization, and I'm a very open leader, so I just... this is no intention to hide anything, and so we are as open as we can be. And like I said, last year there was feedback that we should have been at the Commission, and we're doing that. And the PowerPoints of the previous were even more complicated than this, and we didn't send them out in advance. And so we will learn and grow from that. And with respect to Cowie and others, we do have working committees that Mr. Pepper and Mr. Babe work on, and we are happy to meet with anybody, any resident, any organization, and walk them through this survey and take their feedback and work with them and bring forward any recommendations. And if you want this back in that context, we can do that also.
Yeah. Well, I fully understand that, but it's just that there's a starting point for it, and that's this meeting. I did have a question on some of the safety things. I don't see the mention of safety in park and rides here at all, and I don't know whether it's considered to be encompassed in things, but I know walking across a very, very long park and ride at 11 o'clock at night even makes me a little bit nervous. And have you done any of the safety service for people who are using park and rides and might have to ride, particularly late at night?
Madam Chair, first of all, we do that work in a different way. We do a specific safety analysis called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, for every transit facility, transit station, park and ride lot, and that's consistently and always done. We don't ask questions deliberately that get very specific in this survey because it's a survey of just a sample of our customers. There's a very, very small proportion of our customers that have any experience at park and ride lots. Very few of our customers use park and ride lots, and so when we survey only 1,500 people, only 800 of whom are transit customers, the number of people who we call who have used a park and ride lot is going to be down in the dozens at the very most. And so there wouldn't be any way of getting a solid trend from that. So all through the survey, we're deliberately asking general questions, experience questions, talking about buses and facilities generally, and not getting to specific elements like parking lots or elevators or particular parts of the city or anything else. We have to keep it general in order to get numbers that we can be confident in and that we can compare from year to year.
So that possibly in the late night things that might be buried in there with some of the respondents, but you wouldn't be able to pick that out.
The late night questions would encompass all aspects of how the customers experienced it. We also didn't define for the customers what late at night meant. We wanted to leave that for them, just as they're giving their opinion without us guiding them on what safety and security means. We're not guiding them on what late at night means. We've just separated them between waiting for the bus and getting on the bus. But that would include waiting at intersections, walking to stations from park and ride lots, waiting for the bus at busy stops downtown or at quieter stops. It's all added together. And when we see these numbers, obviously there's some places that we'd like to do future work and look in a little more detail, but that has to be a separate project.
And the last question I had, Madam Chair, was about comparison of these figures with other transit systems. Are these done in a way that we can actually compare to see, are we doing as well or better? I know we're improving locally, and that's important, but I don't know how we compare to other large transit users in Canada.
Madam Chair, every major transit system asks questions like this and reports them to their governing bodies. Not all ask them the same way, and not all are on the same basis. But we will be looking at that comparison. For instance, we looked particularly at the questions that we'd asked that we modeled on the Calgary survey and compared them to the results of the Calgary survey, and saw that we were getting generally similar findings. But every city has a different feel to it. Every city has a different way of designing and configuring their transit system. Ours is very bus-based with frequent service, so waiting times are lower, but the number of people is also lower. A system like Calgary, having their light rail system on the street downtown, a different experience. Every city also has a different set of policies and different all sorts of things that guide them. So I would never want to get too precise on the comparisons. But when we look at these with other cities, we'll be interested to see how these numbers compare in general to other cities across Canada and the U.S. and perhaps even Europe, but we haven't done that work yet.
I would think the questions that are sort of like overall satisfaction as a whole and things would be fairly comparable. So it would be helpful sometimes if you do see some of these to see if we are improving or not, because I do see a major improvement here, but it's really hard to know if it's better or not. And as far as short waiting times, that may be in the central core of the city, but it certainly isn't our experience outside the Greenbelt, where waiting can be 30 minutes plus quite often. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkinson. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I echo your congratulations, Madam Chair, for OC Transpo staff for bringing this forward. I consider market research an invaluable tool as we work to increase satisfaction and ridership, and very pleased that we're collecting this data. Now, in preparation of the presentation today, I reviewed the results of the 2012 Customer Usage and Attitude Survey. Can I confirm that's the equivalent survey for last year? The title was a bit different.
Yes, it is.
Okay, fantastic. And so why exactly was there no technical briefing this year? Because it wasn't deemed useful last year?
Because some of the feedback last year was, why don't you bring this to the Commission? And we brought it to the Commission this year.
The reason I bring it up is because I'm looking at the technical briefing report from last year, and it contains a lot of elements that are not included in the survey. Anyway, I'll get to those. I had some questions about the methodology. I see that it was weighted to give equal participation to the various geographic areas of the city, and certain statistics were also presented as being separated between men and women. Was it weighted at all to be representative of age, employment status, or whether they take transit for work or personal purposes, etc.?
Madam Chair, weighted for age, certainly. Weighted for women and men, certainly. Or not weighted, but survey calibrated, and made sure we got enough observations, and by district of the city. And for the other parts, I can take note of that question, and we'll check it out in detail and get back to the Commissioner later.
Yeah, I was curious about age and employment status, too, because it's well known that certain demographics are more willing than others to answer surveys over the phone, too. Now, on slide 30, I noticed there was, let me just pull it up here. There was a change to one question about previously we asked during rush hour, it is reasonable that you may have to stand. And the majority said yes. But that question was changed to during rush hour, you often get a seat. Why exactly was that changed?
Madam Chair, we wanted to ask more about what customers were experiencing rather than whether they agreed or disagreed with the policy decisions of Council.
Is it not true that changing the question after so many years of data, it makes it more difficult for comparative purposes to study perceptions. does it not?
Madam Chair, we absolutely do not intend to make any comparison between the previous question and the new question.
In the 2012 survey, there was questions about concerns about making transfers on buses. Was that question posed this year?
There were questions about how long people considered it reasonable to wait when making a transfer. Is that question has been asked, but it's been asked in certain years, but not in other years, and it's really more of a, again, it's not so clearly asking for people's judgment on their experience as for a judgment on some of the design and policy decisions. So we didn't report on it here, but we have, I believe we did collect that data, but it just doesn't say very much to us.
More specifically, it was the biggest concern about making a transfer asked among transit users, and it showed that worries about missing connections are far higher than any other concerns, like not getting a seat, the hassle of moving from one bus to another. And I was just curious whether that specific question was asked again this year.
We can check into that and get back to the Commissioner.
I asked because it struck me as very high, the worry that missing the connection is the chief reason to not want to do a transfer. And I've asked, kind of dropped suggestions with OC Transpo about making changes to reprogram the travel planner so that the minimum transfer time it gives between routes is 3 or 4 minutes as opposed to the current 2 minutes. Because as a heavy user of travel planner, I've missed my transfer a number of times because of this the first bus is late by no fault of the driver, traffic, weather, whatever, but the point is that this service is not as useful as it could be to our riders, and this question, I think, shows that it is a major concern of our riders. Is it possible to look into reprogramming that travel planner, and what would be involved?
Madam Chair, I received that request from Commissioner Johnson late last night. I've tasked it with staff, and I'll be getting back to the Commissioner on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just brought it up again because it was relevant. Now, the overall rating of OC Transpo has gone up. In the course of the survey, like I'm speaking at the beginning portion, overall perceptions, was there any probing done among those who rated it as poor or very poor as to why?
Madam Chair, no.
Were there any open-ended questions in the survey at all?
Madam Chair, there's some questions that we ask also for the people who rate the quality. We probe a little further and say, and what makes you say that? But the number of people who answer that is getting diminishingly small within the total sample size. So we ask the question, we look at it, but we don't want to report those numbers as being representative of anything because we don't want to mislead you and have variation from year to year that's a result of a survey method be misinterpreted as a result of any change. Some of the questions we ask and report on are open-ended in the way we ask them, and we ask the survey staff to do the coding and the grouping as they're speaking to the respondent.
Okay. Thank you. I certainly agree that being consistent is the top priority when we're making comparisons here. Finally, I noted Mr. Manconi's comment about solar-powered lighting, and I was very pleased to hear this. I think it's a relatively painless way to reduce our carbon footprint and make OC Transpo even more environmentally sustainable. And perhaps more than that, it's also a mechanism that would be very obvious to our riders. They would see it every time they go to a station. So I'm very interested in hearing more about the research and testing that you said was underway. Could Mr. Manconi elaborate a bit on what is going on with regard to solar-powered lighting?
Madam Chair, there's quite a number of lighting techniques available on the market, and we want to try them out, see whether they work in our environment with our hours of sunlight, with our cold, with our snow accumulation on horizontal surfaces that might include solar panels. We've tested some of these in the past and withdrawn them from use because they weren't providing sufficient illumination to be useful. We've heard from other people that they're not always the best solution. There's a lot of capital investment goes into the batteries and the solar panels, and sometimes they just don't give off enough light. But we know that the current battery technologies, the current LED technologies, better design is well advanced from where we were a few years ago, so we're going to try those again. The other one that Mr. Manconi mentioned, looking at how we build the roofs of our shelters, might actually be even more productive than the active LED lighting. If we are able to use a translucent roof that can stand up to our winters, that might just let more ambient light in the shelter than even an LED lighting inside a shelter or at a stop could provide.
So the feasibility studies going on related to all that Mr. Scrimger just referred to, is this something that will be reported upon to the Commission before, say, November?
Madam Chair, in keeping with our style, one of the things, we're not going to overcomplicate this thing. I used to be in the lighting business in my previous life, so I can bring a lot of vendors to the table for Mr. Scrimger to start doing some testing out there and install a few out in the shelters and see how they perform. Winter is the issue, lighting level is the other issue, so we'll keep it simple, do the testing, and if it works, we'll let you know that it's working, and then we'll try to do as many as we can within current budget envelopes.
All right. I'd appreciate being kept updated. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me see if I can shed some light here on what some of the numbers mean. But I want to start off with, I'll heap some accolades here, because I think the trend, in any survey, some of the numbers don't always make sense. But I think the trend is the thing to focus on here, and I think that it's to the credit of not just management, but the whole organization, as you said, Mr. Manconi, from top to bottom, all the different functions. And I think there are a number of players in the room that deserve credit here. So, and to see us getting back, first of all, the highest level overall since the strike, and the second highest rating since the survey began. But I just want to focus for a few minutes on the difference between reality and perception, and I know some of our media friends up there think perception is reality. A couple of places here where we surveyed our customers, the transit customers, but we surveyed others. And for instance, the overall rating, the others consistently score lower. Mr. Scrimger, is there any further analysis being done on this? When you say others, they're obviously people who aren't using the transit system. And so I'm assuming some of them they're driving, they don't need the transit system. Are we looking at why they have a less favorable impression of OC Transpo than the people actually riding the bus?
Madam Chair, so first of all, that's who they are. One of the questions is a random telephone survey, so we don't know before we call whether that person, we don't know anything about that person before they answer the phone. We don't know whether they're a transit customer or not. One of the first questions we ask, not the first, one of the first questions we ask is, have you used transit in the last 6 months? And then that question feeds us into two separate sets of questions. We don't probe very far at this point yet into why people feel the way they do. And one of the reasons for that is that we do the survey just once a year, and we don't know what the follow-up questions are until after we've seen the results. We can, in some cases, we can try pre-programming a follow-up question to what we think the result would be, but sometimes that just doesn't work, and we end up asking a question that isn't of value.
Okay, maybe I can just jump in. I guess what I see the value in here is what I see is every one of those people who has a less favorable impression is a potential customer. And if we're talking about ridership, increasing ridership or maintaining ridership, I think that's really where, I mean, it's you want to provide a good service to keep the riders you have, but if you want to increase your ridership, you need to be able to reach those people who somehow think the bus isn't for them for whatever reason. And to me, if you're trying to increase your base, that's where you need to be going.
Perfect. Thank you. That's exactly what we're focusing on.
Excellent. Okay. So in the same vein, I'm looking at the Presto reaction. And it's interesting that, again, the favorable impression are the people who are actually tapping are coming up with a fairly reasonable impression. It's the ones, and especially the ones who are using cash or tickets, have a less favorable reaction. Is there anything we're doing with them to see why they wouldn't be, like, to me, if you can get that card into somebody's hand, and we've got lots of cards out there, some of them aren't being used, I would think that again is a potential, customer base.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the lesson on that is the same as the lesson on people who haven't yet used transit. This is showing that if you're not familiar with transit, come and use it. You'll be pleased. And if you're not yet using Presto, come and use it. You'll be pleased.
Okay, I'm looking for one other question, one other highlight I had in here, and it's not jumping out. So again, I think the trend is going the right way. I think credit goes to everybody throughout the organization, and I look forward to this trend continuing because that is the way forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bose, Commissioner Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to start, a couple of questions on the methodology, if you will. Do we do this survey in-house, or do we shop this out to an external service provider?
We use an external provider, which is from our standing offer. It's been a competitive process.
Okay. And if I understood the presentation correctly, of the people that was surveyed, about 50% or so were actual transit riders, maybe 60%, and the rest were not. Is that the breakdown?
We asked our contractor to ensure that there was a good sample of transit customers so we could ask more questions, in particular about transit and about people's use of OC Transpo. So it's not an as-it-fell random across everything. There's as the survey went on, we asked them to continue to call until they built up a high enough sample of transit customers to allow us to have good confidence in the numbers.
No, I appreciate that, but in the total numbers that were called, it's about 60% of the people that were spoken to were transit riders, and the 40% were not? You gave me a number of somewhere around 800 or so, I think, that were transit riders?
Of the people who completed the full survey, yes. More people than that were called in order to identify whether they fell into some of the groups that had previously been underrepresented, such as transit customers. So more people took a call than we went through the complete survey with. There was some screening.
But this is based on those who did the complete survey.
This is people, the 1,500 people, 1,525 who answered the complete survey, 820 of those were transit customers.
Okay. So my question is, in some of the responses, it's broken down between transit users and non-transit users. It's not as clear that it is for all the responses.
Madam Chair, for the responses, and we can provide the detail for this in any form that is useful. For many of the questions that we report on here, especially the ones about your experiences on the transit system, they were only asked of transit customers.
Okay, thank you, because my next question was going to be, what does that do to the weight of the answer if you're including people? So even though it's not indicated on the PowerPoint, that's how it was done. That would be helpful if we could have that background information. One of the, and I echo what some of my colleagues have said. I think, Councillor Boas or Commissioner Boas said, it's the trend, and it's trending upwards, and that's a good news story for sure. Though I have to ask about one piece. On page 11, you've got characteristics of OC Transpo over the years, and the first characteristic is convenient and reliable. And we do see an upward trend from 34 to 37%. But when you go a little bit further into the report, and the wording is not exactly the same, but it captures the same notion. On page 14, it talks about top 5 aspects. Bus service is reliable and runs on time. The importance to people is 9.8. And if you go down, though, to the bottom of that page, only 6.7% agree that that's actually happening. And again, I go back to the first number that I gave you, which was the only 37% feel that it is convenient and reliable. So my first question, that was a big preparation for it. My first question is this one of the questions that you broke down between people who actually use transit and people who don't use transit?
I'll find out for you. I don't know right now.
Okay. And again, secondly, as I say, the trend is great, but I think the spine of any good transit service is that it's convenient and reliable. I think the numbers just set that out in terms of what the public thinks as well. But we seem to be getting only, while it is going up, we still have a satisfaction rating, looks like, of 37%.
Madam Chair, I don't agree with that characterization at all, and here's the reason why.
Well, I'm happy to hear your explanation.
The reason is that we ask people to identify a single characteristic. What comes to mind first? They're all positive. So we're asking people, among these 5 positive characteristics, which one do you place first? We're not asking them to rank them. We're not asking them to do anything other than to say, which of these 5 positive characteristics do you think best exemplifies OC Transpo? It's hard to do anything with that except to see how the people's view changes over the years. The other ones, on a scale of 1 to 10, is this important? And if you look at the list of the top 15, or the 15 that we asked about, you'll see that 9 or 10 or 11 of them, people scored as hugely important. So are you concerned about this? Yes, 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 yes. They're hardly ranking them when they say these are the things that are at 9.7 and 9.8 out of 10. They're all consistent, all important to them. But when we asked about these 5 things, what was the first one they said? So it's a totally different way of asking the question. I would never say that only 37% of our people, of our customers, say our service is convenient and reliable. I would say that 37% of the people gave that as a characteristic when asked which of these 5 things is the characteristic that you identify with OC Transpo.
But doesn't it suggest that that's the most important characteristic they're looking for? If that's the first, to quote you, the first thing that comes to their mind, that they want it to be convenient and reliable?
Madam Chair, no, I don't think that's it's certainly not the question we're asking them, because what they might want to be available, the best characteristic, might not be the one that they think we currently have. You look at the list, well, we'd love it if people said superior service quality is the number one thing, but that's not what people are saying. People are saying convenient and reliable. Thanks. We want people to believe that it is convenient, reliable, and that it is safe and secure, and that there is good environmental sustainability, and that it is low cost and affordable. But we ask them to identify one of those, and which one comes to their thinking first.
So explain slide 27 to me then. What is that supposed to show us when its importance is 9.8 and agree is 6.7? What is the 6.7 figure supposed to represent?
So we asked the question, this is a different question asked in a different way, Madam Chair. We listed 15 aspects. These are on slide number 29 and 30. The 15 things we asked about, and asked 2 questions for each of them. Where do you think this is important? Is this important to you on a scale of 1 to 10? And how well do you think OC Transpo is doing on a scale of 1 to 10? So those 5 that we show on slide 27, clearly the top 5 aspects out of the 15 we asked about, almost all at 10 out of 10, just a little bit less. And on those 5 things, we're getting the highest rating back from customers. On bus drivers are respectful towards passengers at 8.9 out of 10. The second highest at passengers are respectful towards bus drivers at 8.2 out of 10. The next highest, that bus routes are well planned, at 7.3 out of 10. The next highest, that OC Transpo delivers good service value, at 7.1 out of 10. And the next highest is that the service is reliable and on time, at 6.7 out of 10. So what we're reporting on there is, first of all, what customers, of the choices we gave them, what customers are saying is important to them, and then asking for the rating on that.
Right, so that goes to my point. So the lowest rating came for the service being reliable and on time.
Madam Chair, the lowest of the top 5.
Right.
If you look over at page 29, you'll see that there were different ratings on different questions. So bus drivers wait until you are seated or standing securely before driving away at 6.2 out of 10 was a lower rating, but it is still by far the highest rating we've ever seen for that.
No, and I
as
understand
well.
that. I guess what I'm trying to get you to agree to, but I may not be able to do that this morning, is that of the top 5 things that are important to OC Transpo passengers, reliability scored the lowest out of the top 5.
I think what this survey does is shows that it's good for us to continue to focus on reliability and on-time performance.
I won't disagree with you on that.
As a very important thing for customers to have a better impression of OC Transpo.
I won't disagree with you on that. And finally, I was glad to hear Mr. Manconi say that there's going to be follow-up with the various suggestions that are made, especially the safety-based ones, with groups such as Cowie, because I think the suggestions are excellent, but I think we have to reach out to the stakeholders and who are at the stops every day and work with the system and see what they say. So I'm very pleased to hear you say that, Mr. Manconi, and I look forward to you coming back to the Commission and telling us what the user had to say about the recommendations that are being made. So thank you for that.
Madam Chair, if I can just interject, I've got the answer to Councillor Aguilar's earlier question. The top 5 and the top 15 aspects, that's a question that is asked only to transit customers.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Aguilar. Commissioner Hobbs.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just also want to first say thank you very much and congratulations. This is really a wonderful result that came out of this survey and indicates the satisfaction that I feel every day when I ride OC Transpo bus all over the city. And I just have a question regarding the influence of Presto cards, because we've just started using those and satisfaction has gone up, and I was wondering if there's been any correlation between adding services like that to how people feel overall.
A couple of comments on that, Madam Chair. There's some worldwide literature review that basically says that if you want to take transit to the next level, a smart card needs to be part of your overall system, and we've listening to my peers in the Presto family and beyond, our adoption rates are some of the highest they've seen out there in the industry, so that's good news. The other thing we're doing is we're following up on, there were some questions at previous transit commissions about looking at EcoPass holders, how they've adopted Presto and so forth, so Mr. Pepper and the team are doing an analysis on that, and we're taking it a step further. We're looking at all our fare types and looking at what Presto is doing to them, so we have a lot of adoption of Presto ePerse. We're seeing ticket sales going down, which is good because they're moving over to ePerse. So we're preparing all that information, and not certain on the timing. Probably May or so, we're going to come back with some information in that regard to give the broader picture. But adoption rate continues to rise, utilization, and single users and multi-users continues to rise on Presto.
That's great, thank you. And I have to agree with that. I was talking to somebody yesterday who has 2 children, and his older daughter was so pleased to get her first Presto card. It was a real badge of honor. And the younger son is just turning to the age where they have to start paying for the bus. And the father was thinking he'd get a few extra months out of the free rides, and the child is like, as soon as my birthday comes, I want that Presto card. It's really important. So that's great that it's starting to get into the culture of our youth. And I just had another question in the safety and security aspect, and I think you may have answered this in your final comments, Mr. Manconi, but when people are feeling less safe, do we actually qualify that at what time of day that they are feeling that, or what maybe area of town or what routes that people feel are less safe?
Madam Chair, we left it to customers themselves to determine. We asked the question during the daytime, in the early evening, and late at night. We didn't want to be specific to say what time evening begins, and I think it's fair to say that in Ottawa, evening is considered to begin earlier in the winter than it does in the summer. But in the environment you're in, when you think it is early evening, what do you feel? We're interested to see how this would vary across different parts of the city, and more specifically on different parts of the transit system, whether people hold those different opinions, whether they're at a downtown bus stop, whether they're at a transitway station, or whether they're at a stop somewhere else. We will, if we want to dig into that, we have to ask the questions in a different way. This survey of just a small number of people is not going to give us enough observations of people who experience each of those categories that we can get a good finding out of it. So for us to do more, we'll have to find another way of looking at it. Put simply, out of the 820 customers that we spoke to, how many of them are likely to have been women or men specifically who did wait for and board the service at a bus stop in the late evening. That number just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And with this type of survey, where we're trying to get overall views, overall impressions, and it's just not possible to dig into those that way. We'll have to find another way of doing that.
And so in terms of the issue with swearing too, and I do hear swearing on the bus, it's not always a safety issue. It's just, annoying to hear people, their conversation littered with swear words. So in a question like that, you're not really, it's just a swearing. It's not whether swearing is directed at somebody or...
We didn't ask specifically to whom the swearing was directed, but I think it is a safety, security question. It's not perhaps it's not a direct physical threat to a person, but it certainly reduces anyone's level of comfort in that environment. And one of the things we need to watch for here is that the environment in which someone is traveling, which is partly made up of what we're in control of and partly made up of the other customers around us, is not putting a hindrance or a barrier in front of anyone as they choose whether to take transit or not.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you very much. A really great survey. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Hobbs, Commissioner Crew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really have a couple of sort of observations and a couple of methodological questions, more than questions generally. First of all, though, I would like to again congratulate all staff as well as our union partners of all stripes on the overall trend. I think that that's significant. Sometimes at this commission, we can get very bogged down in minute details, whereas what I see if you look at the overall rating over the years is that there's two significant dips that we suffered. One in 2009 after a bus strike, one in 2011 after route optimization. And what this says to me is that big events drive this trend. And to the extent that the city can be successful in avoiding those big upsetting events, that's what I think is more than anything else going to contribute to the overall trend upward. With regard to the questions on responsiveness and the materials at slides 12, in the future, if a presentation like this would be made, I would be interested in seeing the answers to that broken out by all categories, and in particular, lumping together succeeding and making an effort doesn't convey an awful lot of meaningful information to me in those categories together. I know that when I'm marking a student's paper, if I make a comment on that paper that you are showing a good effort or making a good effort, it's a long way away from saying that the student is succeeding. So for the future, I would love to see those broken out specifically. I strongly praise the separate emphasis in this report and would love to see it continued in the future on safety. But looking at those aspects that are important, and specifically in light of that discussion with Councillor Eglai, so I take it that the customers or the survey respondents were asked, how important would you say this is? Or is this an important consideration to you? Is that the way the methodology of those aspects was asked?
Madam Chair, could the Commissioner clarify which questions he's asking about?
So specifically, it's the aspects over the years, the materials at slides 28, 29, in terms of what are important aspects. So I understand we say, is this important, yes or no? And this is the number of respondents, sort of out of 10 on average, that say, yes, that's an important aspect. Is that how that
So,
section
Madam
works?
Chair, the 15 aspects that we asked about are the 15 that are shown on pages 29 and 30, the last column, starting with bus service, reliable, runs on time, going down to you pay attention to printed ads on buses. These are the 15 aspects we asked about.
Okay, so
We asked two questions. One, how important is this to you? Two, how do you rate OC Transpo on that?
Okay.
We haven't reported here what rating of importance everyone gave to all 15. We're just showing you here on page 27 which ones are the top 5. The other ones were all lower than that. And we've
Okay.
got that information.
I understand that. I guess what I'm wondering is missing is in those aspects that we ask about, how come there isn't something there to link it with the safety question? I don't see one that is an aspect such as, I feel safe and secure. I guess what I'm curious about is if that were on the list, would we see it go to the very top?
That might very well be true, Madam Chair. I agree with the Commissioner that that we have to find a way to bring all these questions together, to let the customers speak a little bit more for themselves on what's important to them, and a little bit less of a multiple choice question that we constrain for them. But I will say that that's pretty hard to do and get a good, meaningful, consistent answer over a large group of people. It's hard to ask those open-ended questions and ensure comparability and rigor over the whole survey and over the many years. It's a very good idea, and it's a challenge to us to figure out how to improve the method while still keeping the comparability with past years.
So I do understand that and do appreciate that it's a tough challenge, and I would task you with maybe trying to find a way comparable with those other aspects to try and get a sense of how important safety and security is to our customer in comparison with all of those other aspects that we do survey there. And I certainly trust that you'll be able to come up with something, and it might be a new question in the future. Just a couple more comments that I want to make. I do, following up on Commissioner Hobbs, Councillor Hobbs' comments about the swearing on the bus, I also noticed that there's a fairly high percentage of respondents that say they often or occasionally have observed intoxicated individuals on the bus. And I certainly understand the way that that can contribute to a perception of safety. At the same time, I think that it comes at the cost of, or we're achieving a higher societal goal. In other words, there's a lot of messaging out there that is not our own that says that when you are intoxicated, taking public transit certainly is a good and viable option. So although I understand how it relates to security, I don't necessarily see a high number of respondents there as being something that is particularly or uniquely a concern for safety. I guess my final comment that I do want to make is on the stuff on sexual harassment. I certainly applaud the overall conclusion that intuitively women experience more often than men. I do think that one area where this survey may be off is the finding that 1% of men report being sexually harassed often, whereas no women reported that. And that suggests to me that there is a methodological quirk in that, or just a statistical blip. I'm certainly pleased to see that only 2% of women on this survey reported that they were sexually harassed often or occasionally. But at the same time, I noticed that 8% of women say they've observed someone else being sexually harassed, and 7% of men say they've seen it sort of often or occasionally. And so that suggests to me that it's being observed more often than riders are reporting it. And so I think just my message there would be that just, I would expect that 8 or 7% might correspond to what is observed in other public spaces as well. But I think the message to the women's groups out there and to all riders would be that we're not necessarily seeing that as a battle won, and that our efforts are certainly ongoing to continue to address this issue wherever it's found. And I know that Mr. Manconi has mentioned the Women's Safety Working Group being led by James Babe and David Pepper. And I would just like to get an assurance from Mr. Manconi again that notwithstanding the pretty good results on the issue that we've seen, that is continue to be something that we're going to address, and that the women's organizations can come and give us their feedback on.
Madam Chair, we will certainly share these results with the women's group, and more importantly, we're going to connect up all the dots of the 10-point safety plan and the other ideas that they're bringing to the table, such as promoting reporting of incidents, which will helpfully drive, because our position is one too many. So whether it's 1%, 8%, it should be 0 is what we're striving for. So we will absolutely work with them. This gives us additional data to focus our energy and where we should be targeting our efforts. And also the crime analysis work that Mr. Babe is doing with OPS will be overlaid into that.
And that message that 1% is one too many is exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Crew. Commissioner Kadri.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just before I ask a couple of questions that I think are lagging in the survey, before that, I'd just like to say, Mr. Manconi, and I think you and I have talked about enough about this, including this Transit Commission, I guess about a year and a half ago, about communications. And I think because this service deals with so many partners that are on the street in terms of ridership, partners that are in OC Transpo, the operators, the staff, the management of that part of the business, as well as the partners in the city in terms of your management team, as well as this Transit Commission. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a huge discussion at Council about should we set up a Transit Commission or should we not. And I think, as I said about communication, there's one major component of that communication back through you to staff and vice versa, coming up from staff back to this Transit Commission. I think, Mr. Manconi, you opened a lot of doors with your ability to communicate clearly as well as to communicate the right messages, working with both parts of the business in terms of the operators, in terms of the OC Transport union membership, as well as your management team. And that communication is the key to any improvement in any organization. And I just want to remind my colleagues that what we're looking at today is a snapshot in time of what the service is doing and what the service has come from, where it's come from, and where it is today. Can it be improved? Of course, anything can be improved, but not everything can be improved overnight. But, in terms of the improvement of this service, overall, if you look at the city residents, yes, I get complaints in my office about, overpacked buses arriving late, all of those kind of things. But that's nothing compared to going through a OC Transport strike that we went through in 2009. Those issues, I hope not to see again, as one of my colleagues mentioned on this commission, that we don't want to see those incidences coming back up. Having proper communications, having proper follow-through, I think will avoid that in the future. And I'm hoping for that, and I know that that can be done. In terms of this survey, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm saying to myself, gee, how can anybody criticize these numbers in terms of the numbers themselves? But you can, sort of adjust in terms of style of the survey or the in-depth of the survey, maybe something different. And those are something that I would like you to, take back, Mr. Manconi, and say in terms of future surveys, you will listen to the Transit Commission as you have previously and incorporate some of those items into the survey. Question I have for you is on page 13, slide 64. Item number 3, your bullet 3 says, customer observations suggest that we should invest time and resources into safety and security matters. Was there any question added to that by the surveyor to the participant to say, well, what are those recommendations, or how would you try to improve those kind of safety issues? Was that kind of question asked?
Madam Chair, no, it was not. The questions we asked were all about what have you experienced, what makes you feel safe, what, in effect, what concerns you by not feeling safe. We didn't ask customers to evaluate different options. And that goes back to one of the comments I made earlier, that if in a conversation, you'd love to follow up lots of these results with probing questions, and if you were sitting and talking to a person, you probably would. But in order to get a solid survey over a large group of people, you have to be very rigid about the questions you're asking, and make any follow-up questions also very rigid, and it doesn't lend itself to that interview sort of process.
Madam Chair, if I can add to that, one of the things that we're going to be doing with this survey, the information from that is not only just talking to the women's group, but we're also going to be expanding our conversations as part of our 10-point plan to all users, so seniors, youth, and so forth. And in those dialogues, in those working groups, we can talk about, this is what the survey told us. What do you observe? What are some of the things that you can do? Because these are observations, as you said, Commissioner, a snapshot in time. And what it suggests there is that presence of staff makes people feel more safe on our system, which is, it's interesting because if you talk in the transit industry, some of the talk out in the best practices are, and we'll see that with the APTA review, is invest in cameras, invest in alarms and so forth. And what this survey suggests is, you know what, I don't want to have to hit that alarm. I want someone there so I feel safe all the time, and that presence is more important to me than an alarm and a light and so forth. So we're going to take this and start to disseminate it through our various outreach initiatives through the 10-point plan and beyond, apply the equity inclusion lens, do all those things, and start to mine that data that you've talked about, or those probing questions that you've talked about, without having to do a follow-up survey other than the annual.
Thank you for that, Mr. Manconi. And the reason why I was asking that question is just to give the OC Transpo some kind of guidelines going forward that, you know, people raised a concern about safety and security. How do we address that? Besides the equipment aspect of it, is there something else we could do as an organization to help you know, manage that kind of concern that's coming out of the public? Question number two, in terms of the survey, and I think one of my colleagues asked that about if this was a telephone conducted survey, was there any portion of the survey conducted on site, i.e. at a park and ride physically?
No, Madam Chair, all of this was done with telephone calls.
And again, Madam Chair, if I can add, because I know some of the feedback may be, well, you know, is that the best way to do surveys and so forth? I can assure you that the company we're using has extensive experience. This is a scientifically based survey. The telephone approach was validated every day, continuously monitored and so forth. So I know there will be some people saying, well, that's the old way of doing surveys. We will move to different survey approaches when we go to our new scorecards and so forth. We're having active discussions at the management level about, do we want to have customer panels, as an example, where you can go forward? Do we want to have focus groups that we can tap into? And again, some of that comes from the 10-point plan. Some of that comes from the suggestions that you're bringing forward. But I just want to assure the Commission that the approach and the methodology is done by a company that has years of experience, actually worked at Stats Canada, professional statistician, and so forth. So I am not concerned at all about the approach and the methodology. I just wanted to give you that assurance, Commissioner.
And neither am I, Mr. Manconi, because the company that you mentioned is a viable company. So I have no concerns with the actual survey that these results represent. But my concern is going forward, are there better ways of doing surveys? And that's something that I think we need to look at, because telephones, as you know, at least in my household, I don't have a landline anymore. I'm doing cell phone communications, and I think quite a few residents are that way. So I'm just saying, if you want to capture a total impression out of a community or out of a ridership program, then maybe we have to look at additional portions of the survey besides just the telephone.
Yes, and that's some of the best practices that we're looking at, where you move to a customer panel base. So you have a group of customers that are there along for the journey, very readily available representative of your base, and non-transit users that you tap into, back to Commissioner Blowis's comments, that you can continually tap into to get not just a snapshot but a continuous view of that. And people like STM in Montreal are doing some very innovative things in that regard, in terms of having customers voluntarily sign up to be part of their ongoing customer focus groups.
Thank you for that, Mr. Manconi. And one final question. In terms of para-riders, was there any of this survey represent that part of the organization at all, or do you know that even in some of these questionnaires, the people that were involved were actually, physically disabled in order to be able to participate in this?
Madam Chair, there's two answers to that. We did not ask any questions about paratransport service, and we did not ask people whether they were a paratransport registrant or not. There might there's very likely to be some people who answer this who are, but we didn't ask them to identify themselves, we didn't ask them to characterize themselves in that way, and we didn't ask any questions which were in that regard. If we, it's a valid question to ask about what is the opinions about the paratranspo service, but it would have to be asked in a different way rather than a random digit dial telephone survey across the entire population.
I appreciate that, Mr. Scrimgeour, and I agree with you that some of the questions would be slightly different in terms of the service aspect for para. I would recommend, Madam Chair, that maybe, in the future that we look at that component of our business to make sure that we're, capturing all of the points of view in the city in terms of ridership, whether it's para or regular ridership.
Madam Chair, we can take that away, certainly. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi. Now, just coming back to my initial comment about communication, and I'll tell you, communication, coming from a private sector years ago, number one item for our organization was communication from the top down. And you just mentioned, Mr. Manconi, about some focus groups, and that was one item that a president of a company called Loblaws, David Nichol, firmly believed in, to say, on a weekly basis, he'd go into a store, pick up 6 customers, bring them into his office, and ask those kind of questions, questions related to the business. And that's that part of the communication. And you, as a strong communicator, Mr. Manconi, I would encourage you and some of the other staff to do similar things in order to get the real focus out of service like that. But coming back, keeping in mind that any survey that you do is strictly a snapshot in a moment's time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Cadre. Commissioner Wan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The positive results in the report, overall satisfaction, that's so great to see, certainly very encouraging, recognizing that it is a snapshot in time, but recognizing what that actually means, that it's not just the number or that one person's doing something right, but that has to come right from the top leadership all the way down, through the various pieces of management, through the union management, right down to all of our operators and people who are on the front lines, and people that take calls. So that is just really great to see, and congratulations on all of that to everyone who's here representing larger groups of people. With respect to this survey, I think it's I particularly appreciate, and I think it's great to see all these additional questions focusing on safety, and all of the resulting data, I think, is really useful to see, when people are feeling safe and when they're not, and that has been touched on a little earlier by some of my colleagues, that information will be very useful in making some good decisions on effective and also efficient use of our financial services and where we're going to distribute those resources amongst our safety initiatives. I know that there are lots of initiatives in the works, and Mr. Manconi, you mentioned earlier today, some new lighting initiatives and things that we'll test, and that's great, and I look forward to hearing more about them. With these questions and the results sort of fresh in our mind, well, this is sort of looking perhaps a year in advance. Has there been any thought, now that we see the results from the safety questions coming back, about what might be some good questions to follow up on the safety, perhaps some specific initiatives, additional questions to ask next year to get some more feedback on, now that we know sort of where our focus needs to be in addressing any extra resources for safety, to adding some extra questions on following up on the walk and ride or any new lighting initiatives. Is that something that maybe you'll tell me that this is too soon and that I can respect? But now that the numbers are fresh in our mind, will those be some things that you'll consider adding into next year's customer survey?
Yes, absolutely. We're, again, back to reaching out to the various groups that we work with. We want to hear their thoughts. We'll incorporate their suggestions and certainly all the feedback that we heard today, and there were some very good ideas that have been brought forward.
Great. The other question that came to mind when we look at from a safety lens, recognizing that this is the customer survey, and of course that focuses on customers. I'm just thinking that our other lens, where we're particularly concerned about safety, are people who are dealing on the front lines every day, like our operators. It seems to me like some of this data would be really useful to have from the operator side. So my question is, do we have a survey or feedback, any kind of sort of statistically relevant knowledge or feedback that we get from our operators consistently to sort of identify where the risks are, the particular problem areas that we need to address for the operators?
We have a few things that we use. We shied away from doing staff surveys because when I took over, one of the first things that I heard loud and clear is, don't survey us anymore from staff. They were surveyed to death. They wanted to see action. And what we did have is we had conversations with 600 employees. We took the time to sit down and listen to them and hear their thoughts and perspectives, and they certainly indicated to us where their focus is and their commitment and their dedication to customer service and so forth. We have our health and safety committees, which are very productive. They feed in that perspective, but I also host union management committee meetings with my senior leadership team and the union executive teams, all three of them, and they have an opportunity to bring items forward there. And then we also have our various training programs, everything from when you're brought in as an operator to what's called promotion, where you come in for refreshers and so forth, and we hear feedback and ideas and suggestions from them on that. So there's multiple inputs for that. But again, I fundamentally believe in an organization that can talk openly about their issues. So what you're seeing is quick action through that employee engagement strategy. We implemented a direct access for any idea, and it's not a suggestion program where you drop your idea in a box and it disappears. It's immediately responded to and by management to say, yes, we can do it, no, we can't, and here's why not. And so we've had a range of things, everything from things that make them more comfortable in their lounges to health and safety issues. So we have multiple inputs into the view of the operator, the maintenance staff, supervisors, customer service across the entire organization.
Good. That's great to hear. Some of those things I knew you were doing, but I think it's always great to hear more information. And now that we're looking at the safety in this survey, I think that's a great next step and very valuable data to have. Thank you very much.
Is that it, Commissioner? Thank you very much. Commissioner Wong. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a point of consistency I wanted to bring up. But first, I'd like to address a point raised by Councillor Kadri about mobile usage. I, too, am in a household that only uses cell phones. And I know that I've been, I still complete, I seem to get more calls than the average Joe for market research. And I've even done a number of surveys while riding OC Transpo. So I believe it's general practice now in the industry to accept interviews that are done both on landlines and on mobile phones. Can I confirm that that was the procedure for this market research project?
Yes, it was.
All right, so we're not missing that demographic. That's good to hear. Now, one issue on the safety and security ratings, I'm on slide 54. I note no one will be surprised that I bring this issue up again, but the presence of video surveillance equipment at stations was rated as making people feel safe and secure, 75% for women, 84% for men. Now, comparing to last year, the question was worded, the presence of video surveillance equipment makes you feel more safe and secure, with no reference to at stations. Can I confirm whether that question was changed this year, or is this just a reporting issue?
Madam Chair, it's exactly the same question, in exactly the same way. We're just clarifying here because in future years, after we get our next buses, there will be a need to ask this question differently. The presence of video surveillance equipment at stations and the presence of video surveillance equipment on buses. But at this point, this is the only place we have that video equipment.
Okay. Mr. Scrimgeour knew what I was getting at. I do note that the percentage, if I average men and women together, it's about 79% that feel more safe and secure with video surveillance equipment, up from only 63% last year. So that's quite a jump. And I note that the percentages for men is even higher than feeling more safe and secure by the presence of uniformed law enforcement personnel. And this number is high despite the use of the word surveillance, which I would argue has a negative connotation to many. So this number might actually be depressed a bit. Now, cameras will, of course, come installed on new buses as they are procured. And Mr. Babe spoke last month about the way that this equipment will be accessed from OC Transpo operations. I recall last year that Mr. Manconi said that there would be new bus acquisitions in 2014. Is OC Transpo able to refresh our memories and indicate how many new buses are expected to be put into service this year and therefore would have security cameras that could be accessed in emergency situations?
Madam Chair, when we talked about this before Christmas, the number is between 40 and 50. Depends on the type of buses that we get bid on. And they will all be equipped with surveillance cameras in the vehicles.
Has it been confirmed yet which types of buses we are looking at? Like, I believe we're not getting any 40-footers, but we're looking at double-deckers mostly?
No, Madam Chair, we're just in the process of getting that tender out, and we do not have the results in yet.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kadri.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I just wanted to say to you and to the rest of the room that I made a mistake when I said in terms of my personal phone at home. We do have a landline. My wife just informed me of that, but I never use it, so that's why I said that I don't have a landline. My apologies. Thank you.
Do you know your phone number, Councillor? Okay. Any other questions? Any comments on the survey? We received or carried? Received on the survey? Received. And thank you again for that excellent survey today. We'll now go to notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Seeing none, inquiries. Commissioner Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two inquiries. One, could you please provide an update on the park and ride at Innovation Terry Fox, which is supposed to be in progress and completed this year? Doesn't seem to be moving forward. And the second one is what evaluation is OC Transpo doing to determine service to new growth and underserviced areas, particularly in employment areas, to ensure adequate service levels throughout the urban transit area? So I just want to know how that's being looked at.
Thank you. Any other inquiries? Seeing none, other business? Adjourned. Thank you.